So it's late, but this is a story I really had to cover because often when I speak about issues around China, or more specifically the Chinese state, it's kind of negative, and I think those things have to be said. But this is something I consider positive. So I'm just going to read it out. I saw this actually on the news, BBC News 24, but this is a bit further information, bit of further information. Peng Shuai. The Women's Tennis Association announced its immediate suspension of tournaments in China. So they've announced the immediate suspension of all tournaments in China amid concern for Chinese player Peng Shuai. This doesn't mention who the reporter is. Peng, 35, disappeared from public view for 3 weeks after accusing a top Chinese official of sexual assault. WTA chief Steve Simon said he had serious doubts that Peng was free, safe, and not subject to intimidation. In good conscience, I don't see how I can ask our athletes to compete there, he said. The WTA has repeatedly called for a full investigation into Peng's claims. There was widespread concern for Peng after she accused former Vice Premier Zhong Gaoli of sexual assault. She said she was safe and well during a video call with Thomas Bach, the president of the International Olympic Committee, in November. However, the WTA said the video was insufficient evidence of Peng's safety, and I agree with them. In a lengthy statement, Simon said he was greatly concerned about the risks players and staff could face if events were held in China in 2022. Leadership in China has not addressed this very serious issue in any credible way, he said. If powerful people can suppress the voices of women and sweep allegations of sexual assault under the rug, then the basis on which the WTA was founded, equality for women, would suffer an immense setback. And there's been voices across the tennis world and beyond praising this decision. This is from Martina Navratilova. This is a brave stance by Steve Simon and the WTA, where we put principle above dollars and stand up for women everywhere, and particularly for Peng Shuai. Now, what say you, IOC? IOC. So far, I can barely hear you. Where is Peng Shuai? Former world number one and WTA founder Billie Jean King praised the organization for taking a strong stand. This is another reason why women's tennis is the leader in world sports, King wrote on Twitter. The WTA is on the right side of history in supporting our players. A number of players, including two-time Wimbledon champion Petra Kvitova and US Open quarter-finalist Shelby Rogers, tweeted their support for the WTA's decision. There's also been praise from men in the sport, Roger Federer and others. Um, I won't read out the rest of the report because it's a little bit long, and I tend to do that a lot. So basically, this young woman, as the report says, she made these allegations. Now, whether the allegations are true or not, is another matter. You know, that's a case of, personally, I think, the risk of making an allegation against a top Communist Party official is so great, why would anyone risk lying in that system? But regardless, the claims need to be taken seriously. And this seems very much like she has been silenced, punished, because she embarrassed the party. The fact that she has appeared on state propaganda doesn't really mean anything. The IOC, I hate to say it, but it's an organization that has shown it doesn't really have backbone in standing up to totalitarian regimes. I mean, they always say it's about sport, it's not about politics. But if you have an athlete, in this case a tennis player, I don't really follow tennis, but apparently she's quite a prominent tennis player, and she's making serious allegations, and then she just disappears for a while, only to re-emerge in blatantly propaganda broadcasts. And the IOC is just okay with that. I think it follows that that's an organization that really cares more about what? About prestige. I mean, I think it's an abomination that Beijing's got to host the games again. The one good thing is it's a winter game, so it won't quite be on the same scale as the summer games. And incidentally, I don't know. I mean, tennis events. I don't think they're usually held in winter games anyway. But um, The good thing is it won't be as big a scale as Beijing 2008 because it's the second time, because it's a Winter Games, because the pandemic's still going on, so there'll be no torch relay for China to throw its nationalism around the world. Um, but this really is a brave stance. I don't think that can be downplayed when you consider how many organizations do kowtow to Beijing, and it isn't just the IOC. I mean, they will say, we're not in the business of politics. We're not. It's not our job to assess human rights, but they do have the responsibility and the final decision in rewarding a city and therefore a country the games. And I think human rights should at least be partly considered in that, because disregarding it means rewarding that regime. I mean, Beijing may well be a good city for the games in terms of preparation, in terms of facilities and so on. It has a cold climate, so there's no issue there. But this is a regime that's presiding over mass incarceration of an entire people, that's making belligerent threats in the whole region. It's threatened neighboring countries numerous times, that has disregarded international opinion, that has been responsible for a global pandemic, that hasn't shown transparency in that situation, that throws its weight around with so called wolf warrior diplomacy, and yet it's getting the Winter Games. Now, granted, that will have been awarded before some of this stuff was really escalating, but Um, I think it's an abomination, and I fully support a full diplomatic boycott, not necessarily an athletic boycott, because an athlete who's trained for a long time, I don't think it would be fair on them. But yeah, I do think there should be a full diplomatic boycott um, from nations that feel concerned about what China's doing. Um, but I think there's this fear of China. I mean, Hollywood will not make a film critical of China. They haven't in about 20 years, not since 7 years in Tibet. Skyfall, like I say, briefly touched on it, but it was very loose. There is this fear of offending Beijing, and a large part of that is financial because the Chinese market's huge. So in entertainment, the Chinese market's huge. So it's not just the IOC; it's Hollywood, it's the World Health Organization. I think they were far too cozy to Beijing after the SARS crisis of 2003, China was humiliated. So, they really, really went into overdrive to influence the World Health Organization. There was an NBA player recently, I'll just Google his name, um, who stood up to China. So there are people, let me get the guy's name, um, Enes Kanter. Yeah, Ennis Cantor. And he's doubled down. He hasn't backed off. John Cena, the wrestler, on the other hand, um, called Taiwan a country. Now, whether that was just a mistake or it was ideological, he then, went into overdrive in his apology. And he ended up, ironically, this is the problem of kowtowing to China. You can't really win. Because in the case of John Cena, he ended up getting criticized by both sides. He was criticized by Beijing initially because he dared to, say that Taiwan was a country. So of course they lashed out about that. But then he was criticized by human rights activists, dissidents, and CCP critics for basically lapping up to them. And this is a man who's a professional wrestler. He's not exactly violent. He's not a weak person, but that was groveling. There's no other way around it. Um, and I think the malevolent influence that Beijing has is just on show. So Enes Kanter of the NBA, um, who was representing Nike, I think really he deserves a lot of respect. And there's others. Any individual that stands up to Beijing deserves enormous respect because even if they're a Western celebrity who won't necessarily face personal safety risks, they still face, financial losses. They still face losing any business interests in China. any commercial interests. I think that takes courage. I think it perhaps not the same level of courage as, for example, a human rights lawyer within the country, but I think anyone who stands up to Beijing, because of the power this regime has, because of the power of nationalism as well, it's not just the state power, the way they export nationalism, because then Chinese netizens turn on people who stand up to Beijing. I've had it myself. I'm not even a public figure. I've been on the receiving end of that. About 5 years ago, um, basically, I stood up for a Canadian journalist who was being attacked by netizens. Then they turned on me. They said I was her boyfriend and so on. I've never met the woman, but I was defending her on principle, that she had a right to ask questions. And they turned on me, and I'm pretty sure they hacked my account and I lost it. So I had to make another temporary account. I finally got it back, but I I strongly suspect that's what happened because it came immediately after these exchanges. So I've been on the receiving end of that. So, someone in the public eye who's known around the world, if they stand up to Beijing, that takes courage. They could be anyone. They could be a sports person, a celebrity, I mean, a musician, or an actor. They could be even a politician. Because too many politicians don't. The mayor of Prague is an example. He stood up to Beijing. There's some others, but frankly, there are too many people who still, in a position of power, who still will not do this. They still think China, given its behavior, should be treated in a normal way. I don't believe it should. I think China talks about respect, it demands respect, but it doesn't show much in return. Now, getting back to this case, if this young woman is genuinely okay and she hasn't been coerced into these propaganda videos, they will be transparent. They will open an investigation into this vice premier that she's accused. You know, if they're serious about women's rights, I mean, Chairman Mao, women hold up half the sky. Will show it, China. If you really care about women's rights, then take her claim seriously. It's not even a case of punish him. Just take a claim seriously, investigate it. But as it stands, it appears there hasn't even been an investigation against him. So it really comes down to they're protecting their own. The CCP regime is protecting its own at the price of this young woman. It's not the first time it's happened either. A few years ago, when I was there, in fact, the actress um, Fan Bingbing went missing for a while. Now, that probably was less about politics, and it may have been a cultural thing because Xi Jinping has announced that there's a degradation of culture. That's not verbatim, but they've kind of cracked down on celebrities actually. Some of that's political, some of it's about supposedly being too westernized or having a negative influence on China's youth. But all of this points to a very totalitarian state, where anyone is at risk. You could be a millionaire actress and you could still be targeted by the CCP. Um, I mean, of course, everyone should be equal under the law, but this is something different. So, anyway, huge respect to the WTA. I don't follow tennis, but I think this was a bold move, and I think other organizations should learn from it. The IOC should be feeling uncomfortable right now. They should look at the courage of the WTA and reflect on their own position. Probably too late to cancel the Beijing Olympics, or at least, they have to save face. They're not going to suddenly turn around and say, "Oh well, we were wrong. We're not going to host the Beijing Olympics." But I think the extreme naivety, if that's what it is, I don't think it is actually. I think they know full well that China has some appalling human rights abuses, but I don't know what it is. They know that Beijing put on a big show last time, so it's prestigious. But this whole mantra, it's about sport, not politics. Well, in an ideal world, that would be the case. But it's very difficult to divide the two when you're holding a major sporting event in one of the world's most brutal regimes. that absolutely has very little transparency, um, and continues acting in such an arrogant way. We could do what we like, and anyone who says otherwise is you know, they're interfering in China's domestic affairs. Um, I don't know what sort of backlash the WTA is going to get. I heard they were speculating on what other alternative locations it could be. London was a possibility. Japan was a possibility. I imagine that will really work up Beijing. But it's up to them. It's up to the WTA. And if China wants to kick up a tantrum about it, they've got this on themselves by the way they've treated this young woman, by the lack of transparency. Um, so there will be a backlash, and I imagine the WTA is anticipating that. But in the unlikely chance that they're watching this video, huge respect. They've done a brave thing, and millions of people will be supporting them. I looked at their Facebook page, and it's all positive. People are really, really supporting this. So far, there hasn't actually been a nationalistic backlash. So far, that's not to say that there won't be. I'm sure Chinese media is flooded full of. I don't know where the WTA is based. I'd imagine it's American, but I'd imagine it's full of this is a Western plot against China. Well, let China internalize that. Um, but they've done the right thing, and they're absolutely on the right side of history. So huge respect to the WTA and to chairman. Just named up here again. Um, Yeah, Steve Simon, WTA chief Steve Simon. Huge respect to him. Um, it's a courageous decision, and it's the right decision.